Okay, so let's talk about something that pops up all the time in music production forums, in those late night studio chats. It's this question. Do you really need to spend a couple $100 on a fancy EQ plugin, like, say, the famous FabFilter Pro Q3, when your music software, your DAW, already gave you one for free? It's a debate that really gets to the heart of what makes any tool worth the money. And let's be real, this quote from a producer online just sums it all up perfectly. It captures that skepticism, right? Because until you've actually used one of these things, it's so easy to think it's all just hype. I mean, at the end of the day, an EQ is an EQ, isn't it? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. So let's get into it. Why would a purely digital EQ, one that isn't even pretending to be some classic piece of hardware, have such a high price tag? The answer isn't as simple as, oh, it just sounds better. It's actually way more interesting than that. Because look, at their most basic level, every single equalizer on the planet does this one job. From the cheap one in your car stereo to the most expensive plugin out there, you pick a frequency and you turn it up or down. That's it. So that initial skepticism, it's completely justified. They all do the same fundamental thing. But that's kind of where the similarities stop. The real value, the reason people pay the big bucks, it's not in that basic function. It's in how the tool lets you work. It's about the speed, the surgical precision, and a few game-changing features that are basically like superpowers for your mix. So, the first big difference we got to talk about has nothing to do with sound quality. It's all about speed and just staying in the creative zone. How does using the plugin day to day actually feel? And this right here really shows you the massive gap in control. With your stock EQ, you get the basics, but with something like Pro Q3, you can EQ just the center of your mix, the mono part, or just the sides, and you can do it on a band-by-band basis. You can even split a single band to treat the left and right channels totally differently. And a full undo history? Man, that seems like a small thing, but when you've gone down a rabbit hole and messed things up, it is an absolute lifesaver that most stock plugins just don't offer. It's really the combination of all these little things that adds up to a huge difference. Double-clicking to add a band, using your scroll wheel to instantly change the width, typing in a musical note instead of guessing the frequency. Each one of these things shaves seconds off every single move. Then there's auto gain, which stops you from getting tricked into thinking louder is better. Put them all together, and they just remove all that friction and keep you focused on being creative. Okay, now we're getting to the first real superpower. This is where we talk about an EQ that literally reacts and adjusts itself in real time to your music. And this idea, it completely changes what an EQ is capable of. So what the heck is a dynamic EQ? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like an EQ with a brain. Instead of making a cut that's just always there, a dynamic cut only happens when it needs to. It's this perfect marriage between an equalizer and a compressor, and it gives you this incredible, automated, intelligent control over your sound. We've all been there, right? That dreaded low-end mud. Your kick drum just disappears into the mix, your bass sounds undefined and messy. It is one of the most common mixing problems ever, where two really important elements are just clashing in the exact same frequency space. And here is the genius solution. You put the dynamic EQ on your bass track, but then you tell it to listen to the kick drum. Now, every single time that kick hits, the EQ automatically carves out this perfect little pocket in the bass just for a split second to let that kick punch right through. And the instant the kick is gone, the bass goes right back to its full sound. It is an unbelievably clean and transparent way to create space in a busy mix. All right, on to the next major feature. And this one is seriously advanced stuff. It's called linear phase EQ. It is an incredibly powerful tool that solves a very specific audio problem. But, and this is a big but, it comes with a major cost. You see, anytime you use a normal EQ, it actually introduces these tiny microscopic time delays to the frequencies you're messing with. This is called phase shift or phase smear. Now, most of the time, you can't even hear it, but when you start making really aggressive EQ moves, especially on things like drums, it can actually soften the punch and change the sound in ways you really didn't want. So, what's the fix? Well, linear phase EQ is kind of like a time-traveling EQ. It manages to completely avoid that phase smear by delaying the entire audio signal so that everything stays in perfect time alignment. But there is no such thing as a free lunch in audio. This process introduces a huge delay, what we call latency, and it can create this weird artifact called pre-ringing, which ironically can sometimes make your sounds less punchy if you're not careful. And just to give you a sense of how much latency we're talking about, one user actually measured the delay when using Pro Q3's highest quality linear phase setting. The result? 1.5 seconds. That is an absolutely massive delay, which is why this mode is pretty much only used for very specific tasks, usually during the final mastering stage. So when would you ever use it? Well, the perfect time is when those phase relationships are absolutely critical. Things like parallel processing, where you're blending an EQ'd track back in with the original dry signal, or when you're EQing multiple microphones on one instrument, like a full drum kit, where you desperately want to avoid messing up the alignment between the mics. And of course, in mastering. So after all that, after digging into the workflow, the superpowers, what's the final verdict? Is a $200 plugin an essential tool for making music today, or is it just really expensive hype? And it's super important to look at the other side of the coin. That price tag is a huge barrier for a lot of people, obviously. Some producers also feel that plugins like this are too clean or too digital, and they'd rather use tools that add a bit of that analog color and vibe. And let's never forget, countless hit records have been mixed using nothing but the stock plugins that came with the DAW. The really good news here is that you don't have to spend a dime to get your hands on some of these advanced features. TDR Nova is this legendary free plugin that gives you powerful dynamic EQ controls. It is a fantastic way to try out these techniques for yourself. And of course, your stock EQ is still the absolute best tool for just mastering the fundamentals of how EQ works in the first place. So I guess it all comes down to this question. Do these pro-level tools really unlock a more professional sound because of their speed and their precision? Or can they just become a distraction from the things that actually matter most, like your arrangement, your sound selection, and, well, just learning to master the tools you already have? There's no single right answer for everyone, but just knowing what's out there, that's always the first step. Thanks for tuning in.